Imagine you're walking through like a massive open world video game.
Yeah.
You're hiking up this digital mountain, the wind sound effects are howling, and as you crest the peak, this sprawling, incredibly detailed forest just comes into view in the valley below.
Right. It's a gorgeous reveal.
Exactly. But here's the trick of the software. Until the exact fraction of a second your character looked over that ridge, those trees did not exist.
Well, they were nothing.
Yeah. To save the computer from crashing, the game only pops the scenery into existence when you are there to look at it. Everything behind you, gone. Just empty space waiting as unrendered math.
Hmm.
So what if the actual physical universe you and I are sitting in right now operates exactly the same way to save system resources?
I mean, it fundamentally rewrites how we interact with our environment. The concept that reality exists as pure mathematical potential until an observer enters the space
Right.
to lock it into a physical state. That's something we usually reserve for coding, not cosmology.
And yet, we are jumping into this fascinating framework today for our deep dive. We've got a document authored by MGM, and it's titled Levels of Consciousness and Their Rendering Ability. And it argues this isn't just a metaphor.
No, not at all. It proposes that consciousness itself is actually the game engine of the physical universe.
Which is wild.
It is. It suggests that everything, from a literal pebble on the ground to a highly conscious human being, possesses different permissions when it comes to rendering the reality around us.
So to even begin to understand the mechanics of what MGM is proposing, we really need to look at the digital equivalent first, right?
Yeah, we have to look at how game developers use specific technical processes to keep massive simulated worlds from melting our hardware. Things like lazy loading, procedural generation, and object pooling.
Right.
The core philosophy behind all of those is this strict decoupling of logic from rendering.
Okay, so the way I visualize that decoupling is like looking at this ceramic coffee cup sitting on the desk between us. The logic of the cup, its coordinates in the room, its mass, the internal temperature of the clock, all that data can exist in the background code at all times.
Right.
But its visual appearance, the reflection of the light, it only loads or renders when I walk into the room and actually look at it.
Precisely. And the necessity of that decoupling comes down to memory management. A vast open world environment just cannot have a million trees, thousands of NPCs, and complex weather systems all actively consuming processing power at the exact same time.
The system would just bottleneck and crash immediately.
Exactly. So developers solve this through lazy loading. That's the process of allocating memory to an object only at the exact millisecond it's needed by the player.
Right, and procedural generation builds the world on the fly as you approach it.
Yeah, and then there's object pooling, where objects are kept dormant and only instantiated when you directly interact with them. The system aggressively discards anything outside your immediate field of view.
The engine is basically just constantly asking, is an active player observing this? And if the answer is no, it doesn't waste the juice.
Right.
Now, taking a clever memory-saving trick used by software engineers and projecting it onto the physical universe, I mean, that feels like a huge leap. But the compelling part of MGM's argument is that quantum physics has been screaming something remarkably similar to us for nearly a century.
Oh, absolutely. The foundational evidence for this comes from the subatomic realm, where particles behave in ways that completely shatter our everyday assumption of, a static objective reality.
Right, the wave function collapse.
Yes. In quantum mechanics, before a particle like an electron is measured, it doesn't actually exist in a single defined location. It exists in a state of superposition.
So it's quite literally a wave of pure potential.
Exactly. It occupies all possible states and locations simultaneously.
It's essentially just a floating list of mathematical probabilities, right?
Yes, and it remains a wave of probabilities until the exact moment of measurement. The act of interaction causes that vast weight of potential to just instantaneously collapse into a single definite physical state.
Which brings us to the famous double-slit experiment. We all know this one, right?
Mm-hmm.
You fire particles through a barrier, and it creates a wave-like interference pattern. But the second you place a detector there, just to watch which slit the particle goes through.
A wave function collapses.
Yes. The particle stops acting like a wave of probabilities and starts acting like a solid physical bullet.
Yeah.
It's as if the universe registers that it's being watched and immediately forces the particle to pick a definitive state.
And that phenomenon alone is paradigm shifting. But the source material takes us even further down the rabbit hole with physicist John Wheeler.
Oh, the participatory universe concept.
Exactly. Wheeler proposed that observation doesn't just solidify the present moment. He argued it actually has the capacity to reach back and solidify the past.
Okay, this is where the physics starts sounding like straight-up magic. How does me observing something today change the past?
Well, Wheeler illustrated this with a really brilliant cosmic thought experiment. Imagine light from a distant quasar that has been traveling toward Earth for billions of years.
Mm.
Between us and that quasar is a massive galaxy. Because of gravitational lensing, the gravity of that intermediate galaxy bends the light. It forces the photons to take one of two distinct paths around it to reach our telescopes.
Right, so it goes left or right around the galaxy.
Exactly. But Wheeler suggested that the photon exists in a superposition. It's actually taking both paths as a wave of potential for billions of years.
Wow.
The moment an astronomer looks through a telescope on Earth today and measures that photon, they aren't just collapsing its state in the present. They are retroactively deciding the specific path that light took billions of years ago.
That is insane. So the light was just hovering in the universe's background code as a maybe since before the Earth was even formed, just waiting for a conscious observer to finally log in and look up.
That is the implication, yeah. And we know this isn't just theoretical musing because of Bell's theorem.
Right.
For decades, the old guard of classical physics argued for local realism. That's the idea that particles must have hidden fixed properties like spin or momentum even when we aren't looking at them.
Like, they assumed the universe was already fully rendered, we just lacked the tools to see the code.
Exactly. But exhaustive experiments testing Bell's inequalities have consistently proven that local realism is totally false. Particles genuinely lack fixed physical properties independent of measurement.
Okay, hold on. Let me push back here.
Go for it.
I buy this for an isolated photon in a vacuum or a highly controlled laser in a sterile lab. But my couch doesn't pop out of existence when I turn off the living room lights.
Right.
Scaling this up from a single subatomic particle to a huge piece of furniture feels like an unwarranted leap. The universe doesn't need me or any human being to keep the macro world rendered.
And that is the primary pushback from classical physicists, too. It centers on a mechanism called decoherence.
Decoherence, right.
When we ask why the macro world appears so stable, classical physics points out that quantum systems are incredibly fragile. For a system to remain in a superposition, that wave-like state of pure potential, it has to be perfectly isolated from the rest of the universe.
Which is basically impossible outside of a vacuum chamber.
Exactly the point of decoherence. In the real world, a quantum system is constantly bombarded by the environment. An electron isn't just floating in a void, it is continuously colliding with air molecules, absorbing heat, bouncing off light photons.
Oh, I see.
Decoherence theory argues that the environment itself acts as the continuous observer. Every single time a stray photon bounces off your couch, that physical interaction constitutes a measurement.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it forces the quantum wave to collapse into a definite state long before a human ever walks into the room.
So to bring it back to the game engine analogy, decoherence is like an automated security camera keeping the map loaded even when the player isn't logged in.
That's a great way to put it.
The constant physical interactions between the air, the light, and the fabric of the couch keep the physical world running in the background. The interaction itself is the rendering.
Yes, that is the standard view of objective reality and the many worlds interpretation. They argue observation is not some mystical act of creation requiring a conscious mind. It's simply a physical interaction between two thermodynamic systems. Yeah. But there is a massive unresolved issue at the heart of this, known as the measurement problem.
Because physics still lacks a unified definition of what threshold of interaction actually constitutes a true measurement.
Right, exactly. Is a single photon hitting a single atom enough to collapse the wave function of an entire object? We don't really know.
That's where the MGM document vehemently breaks away from mainstream physics. MGM argues that relying on decoherence to explain away the need for an observer is looking at the equation backward.
Completely backward. Mainstream science views consciousness as a late-stage byproduct of the universe.
Right. The traditional timeline.
Yeah. The assumption that first you have dead matter, then you get basic biology, which evolves into complex neural networks, and eventually, poof, consciousness emerges as a happy accident of brain chemistry.
But MGM completely flips this hierarchy. They argue consciousness isn't the byproduct of the game engine. Consciousness is the game engine.
It's the foundational base layer of reality. MGM proposes that everything contains quantum information, and wherever there is quantum information, consciousness is inherently present.
So consciousness isn't restricted to biological brains.
Not at all. Trees, animals, buildings, they all act as localized nodes of observation.
That reframes the entire simulation hypothesis. Like, we aren't trapped inside a computer simulation running on some alien server. Reality is something we are actively doing.
Yes, and there is serious academic scaffolding supporting this perspective. The document highlights integrated information theory, or IIT, developed by neuroscientist Giulio Tononi.
Oh, I've heard of IIT, but how do you mathematically quantify something as subjective as consciousness?
Well, Tononi does it by measuring a system's phi.
Phi.
Yeah, it's a metric of how much complex, integrated information a system contains. According to IIT, consciousness isn't magic. It's simply what happens when information is sufficiently integrated and irreducible.
Okay, so if a system can process and synthesize data in a way that is greater than the sum of its parts, it possesses intrinsic existence.
Exactly. By that logic, a highly integrated human brain has a massive phi. But a dense forest ecosystem, or even an advanced artificial neural network, also possesses a mathematically verifiable level of consciousness.
The source also connects this to quantum information theory, right?
Yeah.
Which posits that the universe isn't fundamentally constructed of solid stuff like atoms or quarks. The base unit of the universe is pure information.
Yes.
And the defining characteristic of information is that it inherently requires a knower to be processed.
If the universe is constructed of information, and information necessitates a knower, then any structure containing quantum information is inherently part of the conscious field.
Which dramatically expands Wheeler's participatory universe.
Hugely. We aren't just talking about a human astronomer looking at a distant star anymore.
Right.
A tree processes the sunlight, and the sun is gravitationally influenced by the mass of the Earth where the tree grows. They are continuously exchanging data, observing each other, and co-collapsing each other into physical reality.
Okay, I appreciate the elegance of the tree and the sun co-collapsing reality. That's beautiful. But if everything that processes information acts as an observer, are we saying a literal brick in a wall is just as conscious as I am?
Well,
Because a brick doesn't have a nervous system. It doesn't have intent. Suggesting a brick is rendering reality feels a bit absurd.
and MGM anticipates that exact criticism. Critics call it the complexity gap. Traditional science struggles to explain how a static assembly of dead materials, like a brick, could generate the awareness to collapse a wave function.
Right. It doesn't make sense.
So MGM introduces a crucial nuance here: the hierarchical rendering system. Consciousness is ubiquitous, but it is not egalitarian.
Ah.
There are distinct tiers of consciousness, and your tier dictates your permissions to influence the environment.
Let's walk through those tiers because this really clarifies the whole framework for me. At the absolute bottom, you have the low-level nodes. This is your pebble or your brick.
Exactly. A pebble possesses what MGM categorizes as a passive consciousness. Because its structural complexity is incredibly low, its phi is near zero.
So it's just a stable data point.
Right. It exists as a stable data point in the universe. It holds its physical form, anchoring that tiny fragment of reality, but it has absolutely no capacity to actively alter or influence the world around it. It's merely a placeholder in the code.
Got it. Then we move up a tier to medium-level nodes.
Yeah.
The trees, the plants, the fungal networks.
This represents active biological consciousness. A tree is doing much more than just holding its shape. It processes solar energy, it responds to moisture gradients in the soil, it communicates via root networks.
It's actively processing data.
Yes, it actively processes data and renders its immediate ecosystem. It has vastly more permissions in the game engine than the passive pebble.
And finally, at the top of the hierarchy, we have the high-level nodes, humans. We possess creative consciousness.
Yes, we do.
We don't just passively anchor reality. And we don't just biologically react to our environment. We actively manipulate, dismantle, and recode the world. We mine the stone, chop down the trees, build skyscrapers. We bend the physical code to our will.
We operate with the highest hardware specs. And the source material points to a highly specific physical mechanism to explain why human consciousness possesses this unprecedented rendering power.
Right.
It references the Orcher theory.
Orchestrated objective reduction. This is that controversial but incredibly compelling theory developed by physicist Sir Roger Penrose and anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff.
That's the one. Penrose and Hameroff suggest that the true seat of consciousness isn't simply the firing of chemical synapses between neurons. They argue consciousness originates from quantum striations occurring deep inside the cellular structure.
Inside these microscopic protein lattices called microtubules.
Exactly.
But wait, how do microtubules survive decoherence? We just established that the warm, messy, chaotic environment of a brain should instantly collapse any quantum state.
And that is the absolute genius of the Orchard model. Penrose and Hameroff propose that the specific tubular structure of these proteins effectively shields the quantum vibrations from the surrounding biological noise.
Oh, that's wild.
Yeah, the microtubules act as little isolation chambers. They allow a quantum superposition to be maintained just long enough to reach a specific threshold of gravity or complexity.
And then?
When it hits that threshold, it undergoes an objective reduction, a self-collapse. And each of these collapses is a discrete moment of conscious awareness.
The microtubules are literally the physical hardware for processing the game engine,
Exactly.
expanding on our computer analogy. A pebble has absolutely zero microtubule architecture. A tree has incredibly rudimentary hardware. But the human brain, packed with trillions of these microtubule structures, is like a massive liquid-cooled server farm,
Yes, beautifully put. We have an exponentially higher density of quantum processors.
which gives us the raw computational power to not just hold a wave function in place, but to shape how it collapses.
Precisely. Because of that advanced architectural hardware, we aren't limited to merely rendering our immediate surroundings. We can direct the flow of reality. Which brings us to a critical distinction within MGM's framework, the spectrum of human consciousness itself.
Right, because simply possessing a human brain doesn't guarantee you are fully utilizing the hardware.
Not at all. MGM draws a sharp line between a nearly unconscious human and a highly conscious human.
Think about how much of an average day is spent on pure autopilot.
Exactly. MGM suggests that a nearly unconscious person is operating entirely on reflexive habit. In the vocabulary of gaming, they're navigating life exactly like an NPC, a non-player character.
They are blindly reacting to the physics engine.
Right, just bouncing off the walls of their circumstances, completely oblivious to the underlying mechanics of the reality they inhabit.
They have the server farm in their head, but they are only using it to run like a calculator app.
That's hilarious, but
Right.
yeah, it's true.
Contrast that with a highly conscious human. This individual operates like a developer or a power user. They are acutely aware of the underlying code.
Yes. They recognize that they don't have to just react to the environment. Their observation actually forms the environment. MGM implies they can even influence the RNG, the random number generator, or the luck and probability of their own life trajectory.
Which sounds a bit like manifestation, but the text anchors this concept firmly in quantum mechanics through the principle of intentionality, right?
It does. Several experimenters in the quantum field have produced data suggesting that the focused intent of a conscious observer can subtly skew the statistical results of random events.
So the expectation of the observer actually changes the mathematical output.
While it remains a subject of intense debate, the implication is profound. If human intention is a measurable physical force that can bias quantum probability, then a highly conscious, intentional human isn't just watching a pre-rendered movie.
Right.
They are actively customizing and rendering a highly specific reality in a way an NTC human never will.
So why does the architecture of microtubules or the physics of wave function collapse matter to you listening to this deep dive right now? Because if MGM's thesis holds any weight, it radically shifts the burden of responsibility for your own life.
Completely.
Your daily level of active awareness directly dictates how much of your environment you are actively shaping versus how much you are just passively inheriting from the people and systems around you. You possess the top-tier hardware. You have the developer permissions.
The framework is essentially a call to stop sleepwalking through the simulation. You just have to wake up and actually take the controller.
It demands a total reevaluation of our agency. I mean, when we connect lazy loading in software to Wheeler's participatory universe, and we map the complexity of integrated information theory onto the quantum processing power of our own microtubules, we are left with a universe that is desperately waiting for us to tell it what to be.
And realizing that you are the engine really changes how you walk through the world. But, we can't wrap up a deep dive into the nature of reality without leaving at least one thread pulled.
Of course. Lay it on us.
The source material leaves us with a fascinating philosophical knot known as the boundary problem.
The boundary breath.
Yeah. We've established that under this framework, physical objects with complex information, like a house, possess a localized node of consciousness to observe and anchor reality.
Right.
But if reality is built on integrated information, where exactly does the boundary of that consciousness begin and end? In a coded video game, a developer draws a strict polygon, this is the house, this is the ground.
I see where this is going.
In the physical universe, where does the soul of the house end, and the consciousness of its individual wooden planks, or the nails holding it together, begin?
Wow, it makes you look at your surroundings entirely differently. When you reach out and open a door today, ask yourself, are you interacting with a piece of dead matter? Or are you and the structural node of that door continuously co-rendering each other into physical existence? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the code of your own reality, and we will catch you next time.